Today's session is more about to understand from Indian Angel Network's portfolio of approximately 150 plus companies that what are their strategies on surviving during these challenges of the COVID. We also have some of our incubated startups to have dialogue with Padmaja, and we also have Ms. Pyali Chattopadhyay from TIE. I welcome all of you to the session. So without further ado, I would hand it over to Pyali to initiate the conversation, and then we'll follow our own itinerary. Pyali, over to you, please.
Sure. Thank you, Dheeraj, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm part of TIE Ahmedabad. TIE stands for the Indus Entrepreneurs, and it is one of the largest not-for-profit organizations present across 12 countries, fostering entrepreneurship through networking, mentoring, and knowledge sharing. The speaker for today, Padmaja Ruparel, she needs no introduction to the startup community. The co-founder of India Angel Network, she is an active investor herself. The recognitions she has received over the years says it all. Top 50 most powerful women in business by Fortune India, 30 most powerful women in India by Business Today, and that's running for the last 3 years. Women of the Decade in Investment Banking. This award by the Women Economic Forum. Welcome, Padmaja. To start with, I would like to ask, what are some of the survival strategies that's been working well, or some of the best practices that you have seen in your portfolio companies? We would be happy to hear it from you.
Okay. First of all, before I sort of respond to your queries or questions, Pyali, I would like to really thank Dheeraj, GSAC. I would like to thank Tai, Pyali, Zale, and the entire team. And I think this whole event would not have come together without the support and that Kachi, my colleague, has provided from IAN. So all of you, I think, thank you very much. You all are catalysts of the entrepreneur ecosystem. You're the ones who are enabling a lot of startups to raise money, grow. So keep the good work going. I think it's very, very important because I personally believe, and I think a lot of people believe in the world now, is the fact that it is entrepreneurship and startups which are going to be which are job creators. And if we as a globe, if we as the human race have to get out of this, I think the biggest disaster could be livelihoods rather than lives, which could result in complete, I hate to use the word, but devastation. So what you guys do, all of you, is really very critical to the cycles of economy that we have around in India and of course overseas. So on that note, to pick up your points, Pyali, let me give a little bit of a background here. I think what we are going through in terms of a crisis is far, far larger than we have seen in our lifetime and far larger than I would say over the last 100 years, right? I think we have not seen this kind of devastation, which is coming from an enemy we can't even identify. We don't even know who the enemy is. We can't call, when we had the world wars, we could reach out and say, as humans, can we talk to each other and resolve and close, bring peace into the world, right? We don't even have that option. So this is a fight. We don't know who we are fighting. This is a fight. We don't know how long we are going to fight. This is a fight. We don't know how we are going to fight it, right? The vaccine is a little far away. The second piece that has also happened, the world was anyway entering into a depression. And with the pandemic, this has become just more accentuated. We are in a deep recession. And I think all of you all are following the numbers. You're following country-wise details. I'm not going to go down that route. The reality is that we need to all understand, and startups especially, that it's going to be a really, really long haul, which to me means that all of us, investors, startups, ecosystem enablers, corporates, academia, whoever, government, we need to really think through how we are going to go through this. And unfortunately, for startups, it's even more difficult because they have taken the highest risk career path. The riskiest career path have been taken by the founders of startups. And this is something I think is important to recognize because it's very, very critical to understand what they're going through, the empathy that we need to sort of demonstrate, the hand-holding we need to demonstrate, and for startups to understand that they will need to also think and reimagine things. I would be very, very happy if every startup would put up their hand and says, hey, I have a great mentor who can guide me through this. I don't know, I can put my hand on my heart and say that everybody has that. But I think one of the most important things as IAN we think is mentorship. It is not only fundraising, but it's mentorship. And this mentorship today is actually over the last 2 months since the lockdown has played an extremely important role. I cannot emphasize the kind of role it has played. And lockdown is not going to stop. I mean, we'll have our cycles of, I would say we will have cycles of unlockdown, right? We are going to keep repeating this cycle. I think the big message I want to give to startups on this call, the big message I want to give to investors on this call, this is not an across the table discussion now. It's a togetherness discussion that needs to happen. And I think it's become even more important that it's not only like-minded teams that work together, but it's like-minded stakeholders that work together. So I think the big learning that we are getting from our portfolio, our interactions, whatever we are doing at IAN, I think this is a big one. The second thing, and I think a lot of people, because we are already 2 months down into lockdown and all the rest of it, I think the first things we did share with our startups is cash is king. Okay, simple 3 words, cash is king. So if you have any expenses which are not imperative, not urgent, not life threatening, postpone. Okay, left shift them. If there are, right shift them. If there are receivables that you have, left shift them. Okay, if there are ways of getting grants, getting loans, get it in. So keep a very, very sharp focus on cash. I stand here today a little proud to say that we have yet, except for one, I would say, except for one out of 100 and close to 170 startup companies, there's only been one who decided to wind down. And that decision had also taken place last year. They were trying, but COVID put the nail in the coffin in some ways. So I am very, very proud that the portfolio has sort of stayed the course. And that's, I think, the most important thing for both investors to understand that startups are not likely to grow. If they grow, it's a bonus. If they stay standing, that's an achievement. They have to stay standing. As startups, you guys have to just stay afloat, just stay standing and come out at the other end of the COVID tunnel. Tough, guys, tougher. And you're ready now for the longer runway. You're going to now run a much longer marathon. So to me, I think for startups, and I'm obviously looking at a portfolio of a huge portfolio, right? The single point I'm sort of talking to investors, talking to startups, just stay the course. Think what you can do and think what you can't. That leads me to another piece that, so what happens? Okay, we have startups which are not just based on online or virtual. We have propositions which are offline, manufacturing, textiles, etc. And from the state that you come, which is, by the way, my own state, there is a lot of these kind of startups which are sort of breeding and growing there. It's not easy. And my heart goes out to everybody, but the reality is what it is. It's not going to change because we wish it otherwise. So I think there are 2 or 3 things which are very important. First is to focus on the immediate, which is to figure out and retain and get in whatever cash you can into the company. That's the absolute first one. Second, I would say is how can you accelerate that cash retention? It's almost to a point that you have to be cruel to be kind, right? You may need to have, many of you, I know startups, many of them would have reduced salary bills, they would have deferred them, they would have reduced headcount, contracts would be renegotiated. Yes, that is a reality. There is nothing wrong in that. I'm aware of all the government regulations, etc., and I think a lot of those have been diluted and dissolved, so I'm not going to go down that route. But the reality is that is important. You lose 100 people, 100% of the people lose jobs if one company goes down. But if you cut jobs, at least some percentage retain jobs. So it's important to focus on keeping the business alive. If the business is dead, it's not going to help anybody. It's not a question of a founder. It's not a question of an investor alone. It's a question of all stakeholders in that ecosystem of that company. So cruel, it is important to be cruel to be kind in some ways. That's the second thing. The third thing is actually, when you go through a situation that we are going through, and I completely empathize. It took me a while to sort of recognize and accept that this is a never ever seen before situation. The pandemic did not feature on the risk list of any company that we invested or looked at, right? So there was no risk mitigation. Well, be that as it may, it is what it is. So the next thing you start thinking, just like life, all of us are locked down. What are we doing? We are going back to basics. We are going back to dal chawal and bartan kapda, right? I think it's a big lesson that life is giving us. It's an opportunity, if you look at it, okay, to rethink your basics, rethink fundamentals, and it's a time to reimagine. And I think if one looks at if one adopts perspective of re-looking at things and rethinking, believe me, the human mind and humans are the most adaptive creatures on God's earth. They create something out of nothing. So why can't we create something out of something? Right? So I think the way to sustain yourself, and more than the business will grow if you grow. The business will grow if you are able to sustain yourself as a founder, as an investor, is really to think through what am I going to do? What are my competencies? What are my skill sets? And I'll give you some examples. So to me, the big sustenance strategy is leverage competencies. Okay. So if I am an automobile engineer and we have this company which has created a robotic solar panel cleaner. It's a waterless robotic solar panel cleaner. Lockdown meant lockdown for them as well. They could have sat at home and decided to do nothing and wait for the lockdown to emerge, right? Thank God they didn't do that. 25th, they decided to conceptualize a ventilator for COVID. We are proud to say, not only have they designed, certified, they have, I think last week, partnered with one of the PSUs to manufacture these ventilators and cater to the needs of the nation. They're now working with the likes of DRDO. Excuse me, a 5-member, 3 young guys, each one under 25. Their combined experience is in single digits, right? I think it's a phenomenal example of leveraging competencies to say, yes, we can make a solar panel. What are our skills? Our skills are engineering, electrical, automobile, robotics. Is there something I can do rather than sit down? And they've come up with this. And to help them, there is a task force today, okay, of industry leaders, co-founders of literally a $20 billion company is joining the task force called 7 days a week for 1.5 hours every single day, taking away action points and helping the company. MedTech industry leaders have engaged people with 30 years, 40 years of experience. Sales distribution leaders have joined in, right? Investors have joined in, incubators have joined in, Invest India, the government has supported, the principal scientific advisor has supported, the Prime Minister has blessed. So the whole ecosystem, सारी कायनात इकट्ठे होकर उसको support कर रही है, because these are guys who decided to fight. So I think leveraging competencies is an extremely big learning I have taken. Similarly, if I look at business model leverage, okay, we have a music company, which was an offline music education company. Lockdown. Who's going to pay for music and go to classes? None of us could go, right? In 4 days, we shifted their entire technology online plan. And in a week's time, they were earning revenues from online education. Now they are starting to work with virtual instruments, right? They have now partnered in these 2 months with the best music universities and colleges from the US. They've partnered with the Trinity College of London. It was an opportunity because these colleges were not getting any business. Right? Here comes somebody and says, you know, you're sitting quietly, nobody can use it, I can help you. Why don't you partner with me? Think about the commercial deal. In whose favor? Right? So I think looking at opportunities and how do you view them, how do you change them is extremely important. And this in investor parlance or startup parlance is sometimes called pivot. Right? So to me, what is imperative is pivot or perish. If you do not pivot, you will perish. Unfortunately, there's no third option in today's life. If we don't adapt in doing things which we were not doing earlier, then my friends, we would all be towards the graveyard, right? So pivot or perish is important. But the second biggest foundation after leveraging competencies, to me, is pivot itself. So, you know, you can pivot your product, you can pivot your business model. But what I think is important for all of us, be it the startup and be it the investors, is the pivot of the mind, right? If the entrepreneur does not pivot his mind, if he's not willing to change his mind, if he's not willing to open his mind, if he's not willing to reimagine, it's not going to work. The rest is just a paper plan. And investors also have to pivot, right? So we as IAN have to pivot in our mind. What is happening? Should we accept this? Remember, this is there is something called shareholder consent, right? Did we have an option? Yes, we could have wound it down, right? The other option was to say, hold on, this is a good idea. If I engage, and that's why I said we've engaged 7 days a week, 1.5 hours every day, took away action that we were spending 3 to 4 hours a day, right? Is to say, hey, wait, let's engage. There's something here. We think we can make it. And this company made it. But it doesn't mean it always works. There is another company who's tried a similar pivot. They have yet to achieve. They're going through their testing and certification process. But it's important for everybody, and I re-emphasize the word everybody, for everybody to pivot. So I think leveraging competencies, pivot or perish, and pivot is a much, much larger word than just changing a product, changing a business mind. I think it's a change of mind. That's important. And lastly, I think what has really, really worked for us, and I have to actually doff my hat to our portfolio company founders and to our mentors. I think the deep mentoring that people have given to their startups, but more importantly, the mentoring that founders have accepted and imbibed. It's very easy to advise. It's much more difficult to take advice. Right? So I think these are some of the things which have sort of worked for us. It has worked for us in 2 or 3 ways. The number of companies which have failed have been abysmally low. The number of companies which have raised their next round in the COVID time is quite a few. We are currently in a transaction where our investors are getting a cash exit, which is going to give them almost 16 times what they invested in the last about 4 years ago. Right? There is a merger happening of one of our companies as we speak. Yesterday, we opened a deal at IAN, and within about 45 to 50 minutes, we were oversubscribed, and people are still subscribing. So there's money out there for good companies. There are investors who are investing. Remember, yeah, as entrepreneurs, your business is to build a business. What is the business of investors? Is to invest and get returns. It's as simple. So if they don't invest, they're going to lose. Anyway, nobody's doing anybody a favor, right? Everybody's doing what they're supposed to do or what they've chosen to do rather. So I think for good, solid foundations, companies with good, solid foundations with the top line and bottom line, focus on unit economics, focused on customer acquisition, focus on the needs, and yes, they have changed a bit on the needs, focus on the emerging markets, there are new markets, focus on execution, focus on keeping the team together and keeping an open mind, agility, nimbleness, innovation. These are all words which today are becoming even more important. So on that note, I will stop. I think I've anyway overrun my time.
Well, I think that was, thank you so much, very insightful. Dheeraj?
Yeah, thanks, Piyali. Thanks, Padmaja. It was wonderful input. I would not probably would have wanted to interrupt you into these, but we also understand there is limited time from the participants in the audience. So without further ado, we would like to invite some founders which have joined us to have some queries. Some of their queries are very respective to their own businesses, but some queries are very generic, which may also be useful for other audience members. So going alphabetically, I would like to invite Agam Shah to have his concern answered by Padma.
Is the question on Q&A or should I be waiting for the question? Sorry, I'm just trying to check the format.
Our founders have certain questions for you. So one by one, they'll raise these questions to you. People who are with us on the webinar and Facebook Live, they can ask their queries on the Facebook pages or the webinar. We'll take your questions once our founders' questions are done. So Agam, you can start now.
Hi, ma'am. Good afternoon. This is Agam Shah. I'm founder of Plushvi. We currently provide a solution to jewelry retailers to serve their clients remotely and rather safely. So it's a virtual jewelry try-on using augmented reality. And we have pivoted from e-commerce marketplace to B2B SaaS model now. My question is in the same lines, ma'am, that how should a B2B startup, which is very initial in terms of market initial days, and that requires a considerably higher initial capital, how should they go ahead to begin with?
So I think you would need to think through whether the ultimate consumer who is person buying jewelry, whether there is a market there right now. Are there customers who are buying jewelry? That's the first thing. Okay. I don't know. I'm not making a judgment call. I'm just asking. I'm just saying. Second is, I think you will have to align with a little bit with your B2B jewelers, if those are the people who are working with, how they are planning their strategy. And that I think you will need to embed. The third piece is actually I would really go in and engage with my customers by doing pilots and demonstrations much more than what I had planned. Because you don't want to lose their interest so that once they are out there, they can get going. And the fourth piece I would like to put is while you may be getting this augmented reality product to basically have the customers try out the jewelry so that the inventory is low. I'm presuming that's what you do, right? I've sort of studied your company for some other reasons. But I think you should think about what is the need of your customer. Okay, does he want to keep getting the information out there, engaging with his ultimate customers? What's his pain point today? How can your product be an advertisement tool or a content creating tool, or how can you make that happen? So think about how your product itself or your technology itself, with a few tweaks, can work for so that you actually get going. I think that's what I would do. I would not follow the path that one has already architected, and I'm sure that was architected with a lot of thought. Everything is up for in the air right now. So you will have to think of things like that.
True, true. And I appreciate that. My second question, ma'am, is what are the factors a software startup should keep in mind while estimating how much seed amount to raise right now?
See, I don't think it's a software or hardware or any issue. Okay, you should be working through your numbers very carefully and figuring out how much money the business actually needs. You need to plan for a much longer runway. Money is going to be, liquidity is not easy, very tight liquidity in the market. The number of deals that we'll see is not going to be at the same level as 2018, 2019, but deals will happen. Don't forget that. Okay. Why are you the better of the whole lot to get that money? That's the answer you need to ask yourself, right? And I think the biggest piece that everybody is looking for as investors is your eye on break-even, profits, and cash flow. I think that's become imperative. So if you keep all of those together and then say, what is it going to work for you? I think those are generic factors which work for software, but it also works for other hardware software.
Thank you so much. And it has also validated some of the things that we are doing, but it's really insightful and useful for us. Thank you.
I'm glad it's so.
Thanks, Agam. Yeah. So second to join with us is Shikha. Shikha is from AltMed. Over to you, Shikha.
Right, so I'm the founder of AltMat. So what we do at Essence is we convert agriculture waste of certain kinds like this into textile materials like this that can be then converted to anything like fabric or whatever you would want. Now, given that textile industry is one of the major polluters, they're often on a lookout for materials like this because they save thousands of liters of water, tons of pesticide, but also because they are functionally superior with properties like 99.8% bacterial and so on. We manage our own agro supply chains as well as production facilities where we produce these materials at scale. And when the lockdown happened, we were constructing our factory after having a certain success with the pilot factory. And this factory was to do 700 tons of production. But as you see, a very big chunk of our storytelling is around the sustainability USP. Now that a lot of brands are bleeding economically, would environmental sustainability be a strong part of USP or storytelling that encourages them to buy these materials? What would be your perspective on environmental sustainability post-COVID era as a USP?
See, I think the story that you weave has to be the story that you believe. That's extremely important. Okay. There is, investors, customers, and even talent. They are looking for truth. So first of all, create a story, weave it well, but weave it with weave it with what you believe. That's very important. I think, to me, you may leave a point out, but is the large part of it truth? It will show up. So that's one thing I would say. Second, COVID has highlighted the need on health, the need on immunity, the need on good food, the need on medicine. So I think environment is an extension and much more larger than all of these to put together. So I think, in my mind at least, it will last. It's a story that it is going to be a focus. But I always say this, and I will say it to you again, humans forget very quickly.
All right.
Thanks, Shikha. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, in fact, one more from another perspective would be now that times are changing, would the way investors look at manufacturing startups or product-based startup change?
Anything that makes money will not change.
All right. So if it's a sound proposition and if it's still in production, it pretty much is a great opportunity for investors to look at.
I would say if it's a sound business.
All right, makes sense. Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank you
Shikha.
so much.
Thank you. So we'll now move over to Vikram. Vikram, you can start with your questions, please.
Sure. Thank you, Dheeraj. Hi, Padmaja. My name is Vikram Parekh, and I'm the founder of Multiplier. We are an HR tech startup. We operate within the recruitment, marketing, and sourcing segments. We are building a programmatic job ad network that helps connect recruiters, target talent directly onto their phone's caller ID. So someone can look at relevant jobs directly into the person's, who's calling. Where we turn every call into an opportunity to network, discover new jobs, and know more about the people you speak with. My question is specific to the fundraise. So we are currently bootstrapped, early stage revenue and traction. And pre-COVID, we were in the market raising a seed round of 3.5 crores. Should we as a startup continue to go down that route where we're looking at a 18 to 24 month runway with that kind of money? Or should we lower our ask to say, a 50 lakh or a 1 crore, reduce the time frame and look at a different instrument, maybe a convertible note or a safe note?
Okay, let me take the last question first.
Sure.
I personally don't like convertibles.
Okay.
I just think it's a very lazy structure.
Okay.
Okay, I'm taking the same risk and capping my upside. Not interested. So that should answer your last question.
Okay.
Second last question is whether you should raise more or less. I think somebody asked me a similar question. You should raise as much money you need and for a longer runway. I don't know whether that's 3 crores or half of that. I don't think I can comment on that.
Yeah, sure.
But I think you need to look at your cash flows, make sure you've covered everything and more, and you're running for a longer time because monies are not going to be easy.
Okay.
Does that answer your questions?
Yes, it does. Okay, appreciate that. That's all from me for now, Dheeraj. Thanks.
Thanks, Vikram. We'll soon start taking questions from the live session which is coming in. Meanwhile, Padmaja, my query to you regarding is the current policy which government of India and especially state governments had offered to the MSMEs, and some of the startups also qualify under that MSME segment as well. Any inputs that how startups should capitalize that scheme?
Look, I don't think it's a capitalization. There are strings attached to every money that you get. Are you able to suffice that strings? Are you able to meet those needs? Second, I think it's important to get every money that you can. And remember, the most expensive money is equity money. Money raised against equity. If you think it works for you, I think it's a good scheme, to be honest with you. If it works for your business, if you think those are the collaterals that you can provide, and I think it's largely collateral free, but there will be some underwriting you'll have to do or some guaranteeing you'll have to do. Today in the morning, there was an announcement already made that MSMEs were companies who have not registered as MSMEs are also eligible for this. So they are truly making it easier for MSMEs to raise this money. I think if you want money, go for it. If you don't want money and you think you're going to need it 6 months, I would say still go for it.
Okay.
Because remember, these relaxed schemes are not going to last for much long. Won't last forever. That's for sure. I don't think the government or the economy can bear that burden forever. So
this will be my last question before we take questions from the live session. You understand GUSEC is an incubator which is backed by Gujarat's oldest and largest university, which is Gujarat University. The university caters approximately quarter to 400,000 students at any given point of time. Any advice to any student entrepreneurs, because a couple of them are on with this session with us as well, that whether it is a good time to get into entrepreneurship or not, because these are the guys who are between their semesters, who are still studying, yet to graduate or yet to postgraduate. How do you see that, there are opportunities in this time? Is this a good time to get into this, or should they postpone their ideas?
I think this is the perfect time to get into entrepreneurship. There couldn't be a better time. Okay. The world has changed. There's a paradigm shift because of pandemic and recession, etc. There are new problems, new needs, new opportunities, new challenges, and therefore a need for new solutions, new innovations, new products, new ways of doing business, new ways of customer behavior, new markets. I mean, what better fertile soil does anyone want to start up? This is perfect, I think, number one. Number two, the job market is not going to be easy. Okay, that's the reality. So there is a positive reason to do this and there's a negative reason to do this. Jobs are not going to come easy. I mean, we are all reading newspapers, right? We know what's happening. So I think if I was a youngster today, and I'm still thinking about it myself, should I start a business of my own? Should I start a startup? I do want to work hard. That's my only problem. But perfect. I see no reason. Good businesses will raise money. Number three, because everybody's losing money, you are going to get things at a much lower cost. You're going to get office space at a much cheaper price. You're going to get talent at a lower cost. You're going to get technology at a lower cost. Your marketing costs are going to be at a lower cost because people are struggling. They want some kind of revenues to happen. That's why you're going to see deep discounts. So tell me one good reason why is it not a good time to start up? I'm struggling with this one question. I'm wondering why people are asking me this question. Dheeraj, no disrespect, but I want to emphasize the point that go back to history. You have students in your incubator, right? Please ask them, please go back to history, do a research. When did the best companies get started? And come back to me with that research.
Glad, we'll try to do that. In fact,
the answer may be lying there instead of me.
So this is what just to clarify on the point, because a lot of these queries come to us, and it's better to have your opinion. So
no, I'm trying to also, Dheeraj, we face these questions in our lives every day, right?
Yeah.
I think, and I understand why you're sharing them, and I think you're doing a great job. I've heard about your incubator, I've heard about you. We haven't had the opportunity to meet, but you're doing a great job. But I'm going a little bit beyond that, right? I think it's important for us to also open up the minds of our youngsters.
Yeah.
History teaches us, and the best way to do it is to read history.
Glad. So I'll take some of the questions which have come through the live session. We don't have much time, approximately another 10 minutes or so. So we'll try to cover as many as we can. One question which has come to us is about the credentials of the founding team. So how much importance do you give to the founding team? Any specific criteria that you see on the team which is there? What's the ideal size of the team you look at?
For me, the bet is the team, period. It's the founders.
Yeah, I'm asking about the founding team only.
Yeah, the bet is the founders. I personally bet 70% of my decision making is on the founders. And out of how many companies? I think I've personally invested in about 60 plus companies. I've lost out on 3. The bet is on the founding company. I just shared with you that there was this company which was doing a robotic cleaner for solar panels, right? They're doing a medtech product, which is a ventilator. There's nothing there common except the founding team. It's the founding team that did a round and landed back on their feet. So for me, the founding team is absolutely imperative. They are people who know the subject, They have some understanding of the domain. They have leadership qualities. They are complementary. They've lived and worked together in some form or format. And they are ready to do this irrespective of an investor's money. It's diligence, it's determination, persistence, people orientation, performance, and profit. Those are the genes that we look for.
Glad. And any recommendations on ideal team size? A lot of times we see that solopreneurs come in, they have all sort of necessary skills, but they find it very difficult to reach to a co-founder or get a co-founder. So any advice?
Good question. It's a very good question. So I think a single founder from an investor's perspective is very difficult to do, because God forbid, if a truck runs over the founder, right? The risk level for the investor is extremely high. Remember, I said the bet is on the founders, right? So a single founder is also difficult because one person, unfortunately, God has not made us capable that we know everything and we have the ability to do everything. So it's important to have a complementary partner. It's important to have somebody, and entrepreneurship is extremely stressful. So how do you vent? How does someone sort of pep you up? It's your co-founder who does it, much more than your spouse, actually. So a co-founder is absolutely important. Ideal is 2, max 3. We've had companies where we've had 4 and 6 co-founders. I think it's not been a good decision, to be honest, because nobody knows who's the boss, right? If you have 5 co-founders with equal shareholding, who's the boss, right? And therefore you get into a bit of an analysis paralysis situation rather than a decision-making situation. So my view would be that you can have shareholders, founding shareholders, but I think 2 co-founders completely focused, working day and night on it, and even amongst them, they decide who's the CEO, or they decide who is the CEO for what, who is the decision maker for which function. So one co-founder could be the decision maker for delivery or product, the other one for sales and whatever else.
Glad. Thanks. Another question which we received was regarding ESOPs. How important do you think that there is a role of ESOP into a company? What's the better strategy to create an ESOP pool as well?
So ESOPs are very important. Very simply, why? Forget investors for a minute. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you, in case if you can also explain about ESOPs, because a lot of our users won't have much information around ESOPs.
So ESOPs, by the way, is a full session and deserves a full session, but I'll try and make it as layman's language as much as I can. So ESOPs are basically employee share option schemes. Okay. Now what happens is, as a startup, you don't have cash, right? You don't want to dilute more than what you need to dilute, correct? But you want quality talent, you want experienced talent, and you can't pay market salaries. So how are you going to get that talent and be able to compensate that? The way you can do that is through shares of your company, right? So shares in that sense becomes currency. So if there's somebody who really deserves a 1 crore package, you say, okay, X percentage I'm going to give you as fixed or variable in cash, but Y percentage I'm going to give you shares. And believe me, if you work with me, that Y percentage shares is going to deliver to you a much higher value and return than you would have got in a normal business or a corporate. Okay, that's the pitch that you do. So to do that, you create what we call an ESOP pool, employee share option pool. That's what ESOP is, right? You say, okay, X percentage of my company is an ESOP. I'm going to use this ESOP as currency to allocate shares to the key people of mine. You don't give ESOPs to everybody. You give it to your key second round management or key advisors or key people to your mind who are going to be pillars or people who are going to help you drive that to the next level. And those shares are then given as options, which means that they have an option to buy those shares. Okay, if they don't buy those shares, then they're most likely to leave you at some point of time. And if they do buy those shares, they're going to buy it because they believe that that share price is actually going to rise dramatically. So they think they're buying it at a low price. So the share option scheme is a great recruitment tool. It's a retention tool. It's a scalability tool to build up the scale up operations. And believe me, it's a best HR tool. You know what's happening in the minds of key people.
Thanks, Padmaja, for this. So another query was regarding the valuation. In fact, the founders which are with us, they are also into their fundraising exercises. So they have also faced these challenges that what's a good model to value a company, because every investor follows a different valuation model. And when they go to any sort of investment bankers or merchant bankers or CAs in some cases, they sort of have a different understanding of a valuation. So if you can just guide us through that.
Yeah. Valuing a startup is not the job of a CA, nor is it a job of any investment banker. Let me make that very, very clear. Valuing an early stage or a startup company is a combination of art and science. Okay. And I'm going to just give bullet points, and people who've asked this question can string it along for their own companies as they like. First of all, who is your investor? What kind of investors do you want? Do you want investors who are just going to write a check, or do you want adding investors? We believe IEN is value adding. We don't invest in companies where we think we can't add value, right? Because we believe that one of the big things that we bring into companies is that mentoring and guidance and opening up global networks, hand-holding them through tough times, even hand-holding them through good times, because when the next rounds happen and all of that. So that is one piece that entrepreneurs should think about. The second piece is, if they're good quality investors, they would look for a minority stake in the company, not a majority stake. So it would be a significant minority, but it will never be a majority stake. So that's one piece of the valuation that you've answered. Third piece is you can do mark to market to say a company in the similar space, similar size has raised money at a certain valuation. That's one more input to the valuation game. Fourth piece is to look at the multiples of revenue or profit. That's the science part of it that I'm trying to bring. A lot of companies come to us with the DCF style of, which is discounted cash flow mechanism. Yes, many people have used it. We don't believe in it. Okay, because startups are at the riskiest stage of their life. How can I predict their cash flow? A cash flow is an Excel sheet, period. That's all it is. Right? Fourth or fifth, I don't know, whatever. The next point is that once the investor comes in, what is the stake that the founders are going to hold? Typically, people like us do not want to dilute the founder dramatically. Because if they do, then the next round investor will find it very difficult to come. So when I put all these parameters together and then put the amount of raise or where the stage of the company is or what is the previous round investment or data points on the cap table, I will arrive at a range of valuation. That my value, or let me put it differently, my range of saying for this much money, this is the stake I would take, let's say from 20 to 30% or 25 to 30% or whatever that is, right? And you always leave. And at least I have seen in hundreds of valuations I've done, it comes down to the negotiation. The negotiation, believe me, is the biggest diligence for an investor. The entrepreneur's diligence happens there. Big piece of it happens there.
Thanks, Padmaja.
If you look at Naukri's first round investment, he had 2 term sheets. Sanjeev had 2 term sheets. He took the lower valuation. The only reason was he found that the guy who gave him the lower valuation was the one he could talk to much more easily. There was chemistry. So there are lots of factors. Unfortunately, at a startup or an early stage, there's no formula. It's a combination of art and science. And honestly, it's people coming together.
Thanks for that, Padmaja. So we don't have much time left. So I will just take one last input from you, which is a very generic input. From the Angels perspective, what are the key sectors that you're looking in for coming times, let's say for another 2 to 4 quarters? Are there any top sectors that you're looking into?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I would say we are getting into when we started with COVID, we did have a positive list. These are the sectors we are looking at. In my mind, I'm starting to look at the negative list. Okay. So I know Agam is not going to be happy, but jewelry is not there. Fashion is not there. Travel, leisure is not there. Unfortunately, hospitality is not there. I think in life there are need to have and nice to haves. I think we are focused on need to haves much more sharply than ever. I hope that answers your question, because if I went down the list of what we do look, I think it's a very, very long list. So from health tech to biotech to agri to cybersecurity, textiles, manufacturing, innovation, water, sanitation, clean tech, waste. I don't know what I've left out. Anything which is cybersecurity, which is online, virtual, education, skill development, semiconductor, IoT, language, vernaculars, content. I can keep on and on. What I'm probably trying to say is easier for me to say what's a negative list.
Oh, that helps us a lot. In fact, it's easier to remember the negative list. So as we are coming to the end, we are almost at 3. So I would like to conclude the session here by thanking Padmaja for your time. It was very, very informative and was very helpful for the founders who have joined. I see that there are about over 100 founders which have joined us with over webinar and Facebook pages. So I thank all those participants also for their time. Special thanks to Kanchi for pulling this together, and to Piali for the support which has been provided by TiE Ahmedabad, and to our founding team members also, and our team GUSEC, which has pulled it off together as well. So once again, thank you everyone for your time. In case if anyone has any questions related to this session, you can write to us at contact@gusec.edu.in. This is it from my side. Good day, everyone.
Thank you very much. And I have left our email IDs. Feel free to connect with us if we can help you in any way. Thank you all, and thank you for having me.
Thanks for doing it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jai Hind.
Good day. Jai Hind.